A blatant 50% tariff has been imposed over India. But beneath this headline lies a much deeper story of trade, politics, and power. By the end of today's lecture, I am sure we all will be able to understand what are the contentious points behind which Trump has taken this inconsiderate decision. We'll try to expose the hypocrisy of both US and European Union and why they are blaming or shifting the blame of funding the war in Ukraine to India. And we'll also analyze, are these are these percentage fetishes actually going to have a backfiring impact or a reverse impact on the US economy itself? So let us begin. So, first of all, we need to understand what is a tariff. Everyone keeps on talking about tariff this, tariff that. Okay, I'll impose 10% tariff, 5%, 19%. For Trump, these are just random numbers. I don't think there is any particular logic behind it. So, tariff, in simple terms, it is a tax which one country imposes on the goods and services of another country, basically in order to secure a competitive advantage, secure its own interest, or increase revenues. So, this is a simple definition of tariff, much like most of the countries do. Now, a brief history of what exactly has happened. See, post World War II, what happened was US became proclaimed itself a champion of free trade. So it came out with agreements such as GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. It helped found the World Trade Organization, where it emphasized or proclaimed it envisaged a free trade market, laissez-faire. Okay, but slowly and gradually, it started using these organizations' own schedules and clauses to establish protectionist measures in order to gain advantages for its own economy and trade. Okay, so in the meantime, when all this was happening, multiple US regimes under various presidents came place. India and US have always been, it's been a love and hate relationship, whether it be the 1998 Pokhran test or India refusing to sign the non-proliferation treaty, or abstain from signing the comprehensive test ban treaty. Then you might remember the 2013 diplomatic diplomatic impasse when Devyani Khobragade was involved in a situation. Then, but among all these ventures, India and US over 3 decades have also established a foundation of a good relationship, which Trump's measures or Trump's decisions, they pose a danger of undoing or upending. Okay, and I find it ironical that before coming to its second presidency, Trump had unequivocally proclaimed or declared that as soon as I come to presidency, as soon as I am elected president, within 24 hours, I am going to ensure that Russia-Ukraine war comes to a full stop. So now what? He's trying to shift the blame for his own incapacities to other countries like India. We'll see to that. And one of the major guise under which Trump claims that all these tariffs on various countries, including India, are justified is because if you see the stat in 2024, India's exports to the US were around $87 billion, and US has a trade deficit with India of around $45.7 billion. Okay, so okay, some tariffs might have been okay, but it's not that India is the only trade partner of US. US India is US largest trade partner, but US is India's 10th largest trade partner. But it does not mean that US doesn't have other trade partners, or it does not have a positive or surplus trade balance with other countries. So this is not enough. We'll try to understand how, on the pretext of using tariffs to secure US economy, in the name of securing US economy, Trump is now using that same tariff to establish his geopolitical aims. He has started using tariffs as a geopolitical weapon rather. Okay. So if we so first of all we'll address the elephant in the room, which is that okay, India is importing 1.7 million barrels of, yeah, this is a fact, 1.7 million barrels of Russian crude oil daily. And because Russia is attacking and invading, destroying Ukraine, annexing parts of Ukraine, so India is allegedly funding. But Mr. Trump, you should ask yourself, you are hosting the failed field marshal of Pakistan, Asim Munir. You are giving him this platform, your own US soil, US, whom India considers a friend, a platform to speak negatively and stir the pot and incite and provoke India. So, what are you? You are not aiding terrorism in that manner. And you are also saying that in the future you expect that India will purchase oil from Pakistan. So, in the future, even if there is a 1 in a trillion chance that India purchases oil from Pakistan, wouldn't India be funding Pakistan's agenda of terrorism? So we'll come to that. Basically, so this is the and India and the exports and the trade between India and Russia has been to the order of around $67 billion. Okay, out of which the oil imports of India, they correspond to around $57 billion. And the astonishing fact is, this value of oil import from Russia is less than what China imports from Russia in the form of crude oil. China's annual imports from Russia in terms of crude oil is to the order of $62.6 billion. But after so many years of belting and imposing 100 to 145% of tariffs over China, finally Trump has to succumb. He himself has to bow. We'll discuss the reasons behind that. So, but the thing is that India does not have a very surplus reserves of oil. So it is dependent. It is the world's third largest importer and consumer of oil. And it is due to the US sanctions and US policies themselves that force India to make such hefty purchases over the recent years. It's not that India is specifically favoring its all weather friend Russia and helping its economy. No. If you remember, this is the flag of Venezuela, this is Iran. Over the years, what US has done, it has imposed sanctions over these two countries, two of the major suppliers of crude oil to India. So what is India to do? First US imposes sanctions on these countries, and then it issues a warning. It issues a threat to other countries. Look, if you are going to purchase oil or do trade with these countries, then you are going to get sanctions yourself. So what is India to do? And moreover, one major entity or major region of India's supply is Middle East. Now India can resort to imports from Middle East also, but Middle East and which are form a major component of the OPEC, the oil producing and exporting countries. If all the countries including US, start importing oil from OPEC countries, it will lead to expansionist and inflationary tendencies. It will hurt not only the Indian economy, it will hurt US economies world over. And at that time, Russia started issuing discount on oil barrels. So why wouldn't the Indian importers and Indian refineries use that discount? See, we also have to maintain or ensure our energy security, don't we? So it is not that we are trying to fund the war. And in terms of hypocrisy, not only has recently I told you about this China, not only has US gone soft on China. It has reduced and paused some of the tariffs in the utopian dream that it will secure some hefty trade deal with it. It has the EU has been importing billions of dollars worth of oil over the past few years, and even when it has tapered off the oil, Russian oil, it has resorted to the import of LNGs, that is liquefied natural gas. Of course, basic if we come to geography, this EU, most of the countries they lie in high latitudes, they're cold countries. And no matter how much they become advanced, no matter how much renewable source of energy they acquire or produce or develop, they are still dependent on fossil fuels. And moreover, one more important fact, which is it is not about just import of LNG, they import refined petroleum products from India. Refined means when petroleum is crude oil. When it is fractionally distillated, the components such as gasoline or petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, then naphtha, all these products. So Europe and even US directly or via various intermediaries, they have been importing oil, or we can say the refined petroleum. So isn't Europe funding war? So it's a slap in its own face. And further, fertilizers. Fertilizers, the primary component which is required for the manufacture of fertilizer is natural gas. Russia is one of the largest producers and exporters of natural gas. And this EU and further, US have been importing fertilizers. So imports are going on in one way or the other. So this is the double standards or the hypocrisy that both US and EU have been accusing India, and it has been time and again being countered by our external affairs minister Mr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. And one more effect, this I recently read, Chabahar port. Chabahar port, if you know, Chabahar is a region in Iran, so coastal region. So, in order to bypass Pakistan and establish trade links with the Central Asian countries, India was developing this Chabahar port. But when US imposed sanctions on Iran, this also got affected. So you know that India intentionally is not doing anything to harm the interest of other countries. Okay, now this, the major contentious point. Now the elephant is out of the room. Now we'll discuss what the immediate causes, immediate results, immediate impacts have been. Okay, so the major contention since the time of WTO when it was established, and then further, why Trump has an issue is because of agriculture in India. Agriculture, almost 50% of the workforce in India is employed in agriculture, although it contributes a mere 14 to 15% of India's GDP, but still we cannot ignore agriculture. Our life, agriculture is our life. It is a life and science, and it does not only include growing crops, it includes livestock, Pashupalak. It involves the fishermen, the Machuare. It involves the Kisan. Okay. So now some recent examples which will make things interesting. Now, due to 50% tariffs, what has happened? This I have given Tirupur. Tirupur, Tirupur, along with Parur and Coimbatore. These are prominent hubs for garment and knitwear exports to the US. And now 50% tariffs have are bound to hit them. Now, if I tell you the extent of their importance, okay, if we consider this Tirupur itself, it amounts to around annually 40,000, around 40,000 crore of garments and knitwear exports. Okay, this itself contributes to 50% of the total knitwear that is exported from all over India, and it accounts for 35% of the US imports to of knitwear. So obviously, and lot of employment generation occurs because of these textile industries to the tune of 1.4 million. And obviously other things like dyeing, logistics industry, they are also bound to get affected. So this is one thing. Then another thing is the shrimp. Now what is shrimp? It's a part of aquaculture. Okay, there's no need to make a face. This is a seafood, and India is one of the prominent exporters of seafood. And out of that exporting of seafood, 92% of seafood exports belong to this shrimp. Okay, and 60% of that shrimp produce is done by one state in particular, Andhra Pradesh. Okay, and total export $7.47 billion of shrimp produce India, and 40% of that these exports it goes to US. Okay, so again 50%. In this, around 3 to 5 lakh aqua farmers are going to be affected, and further 30 to 40 lakh employees who are directly or indirectly associated with this job, they are going to get affected. Fine. Okay. So these are some of the recent examples how they are. Then this diamond, which was in news 1 or 2 days ago. So how the diamond again, US is one major destination of exports of Indian diamond, that is around 68% by value and around 68% by volume and 42% by value. So it amounts to around $5.6 billion. Okay, that is a lot. And the second most exporting country which exports in the second largest number, that is Israel, of the to the value of around 28%. And Israel has got away from with only 19% tariffs, despite the fact that Israel is heavily still bombarding Gaza, and it has also proclaimed that it wants to take Gaza under its control. And it's not that Israel is using all of its weapons to fight the war with Hamas or Palestine, whatever. The US is also actively encouraging and supporting Israel's war. So what? Now US should not impose tariffs on itself. So these are the hypocrisies which needs to be exposed. Okay, already steel and aluminium. Steel. This is actually picture of an ore of aluminium bauxite, just for representational purposes. Steel and aluminium also form a major component of exports to the US. Aluminium exports in 2024 were to the value of $946 million, and steel was around $1 billion. So they also have been affected by the tariffs. Now, if you have heard that our prime minister also focused on three components, that is machuare, fisher folk, we have already discussed. With fisher folk, it's not about imports, rather exports are getting affected, but it is the other way around in case of livestock farmers, the pashupalak, and kisan, the agriculture crops. Okay, I've given two images here, so I'll explain what exactly is happening. So this is a representation of maize, corn, makkah, you can say, and this is an illustration of bioethanol. So why is Trump allegedly angry, or what is the point of contention? Is that Trump wants, or US wants, that India should open its markets to imports of GM crops. For those of you who don't know what GM is, it is genetically modified crops. In simple terms, we know that there are a lot of pests, diseases which affect the crops like cotton, maize, sugarcane. So if we modify their genes, introducing some element or some organism to make it resistant, so that becomes genetically modified crops. So US wants that India should open its markets for genetically modified maize and genetically modified sugarcane. Okay, but in India, what is the policy right now? That genetically modified, out of all the genetically modified uh, crops, only BT cotton is allowed to be grown, and that too domestically. BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It is a organism which is used to alter the DNA of cotton. Moreover, the per hectare yield of maize and sugarcane is much maize, especially is much more higher than, and there's soybean also. Maize and soybean is much higher in the US as compared to India, and part of that has to do with the use of GM. So maize, it is around 11 million hectare, 11 million tons, 11 tons per hectare, and for India, it is around 3.5, and that is primarily due to the technologies used. And GM, GM maize in US, it is also tolerant to pesticides such as glyphosate. Okay, but once the markets, but India, if it reduces the import duties, import tariffs on the imports of this, so it will lead to immense competition. The regular crop growers, the agriculturers, the cultivators, they will lose advantage and they will suffer. So then that cannot be done. Another thing, this ethanol, US also wants to become one of the main exporters of bioethanol to the Indian market. But again, this is not possible because in India, the policy till now is that only domestically produced sugarcane, maize, or rice can be used to produce bioethanol, and that can be used for blending with petrol. It was also in the news recently, up to 20%. So again, if products from US they invade the Indian market, it will drastically bring down prices and affect the livelihood and consumption of farmers. Finally, if we come to this livestock, now India, again, to protect its livestock, the earners or agriculturalists who have their main earnings from livestock, it imposes 30 to 60% of taxes on imported butter, cheese, or milk powder. Moreover, it has another policy which US just dismisses it as a spiritual or cultural tradition, that whatever milk products are to be imported from abroad, it has to be ensured that those milk products are not derived from the dairy animals who have been fed on the organs or other non-vegetarian matter of other organisms. So these are some of the main points of contention. Okay, now how US is using, I told you that US is using it now as a geopolitical weapon also, not just for economic security. How? If Trump is like, okay, you are not playing according to my rules. Okay, I'll impose this. I'll give you this trade. Okay, I'll give you some examples. Canada. So apart, we know, apart from India, only Brazil shares this podium of experiencing 50% tariff. Canada experiences around 35% tariff. Why? Because allegedly, on top of economic deliberations, it has supported the cause of the statehood for Palestine. So Trump is not happy. Why Brazil? Because apparently the the present elected government is not treating Jair Bolsonaro properly, the ex-president. Okay, why Mexico? Because it has failed to curb the imports of fentanyl, an opioid analgesic, a recreational drug, okay, and also migrants. So Trump said, okay, forget economy, I'm going to penalize you for this. Then Colombia, because of rejection of rejection of accepting deportees from the US. I had discussed this Colombia. A lot of people they travel to the Darien Gap, the Donkey or the Donkey route. Okay, and why Spain? Because it has resisted purchasing defense equipment from US. So this is how Trump is dealing his cards. Okay. Now consider this example also, that When it comes to competition with other countries, I am discussing all this. Like I am discussing about this cotton textiles. The main competitors, like we have Bangladesh, it has been subjected only to 30 to 35% of tariffs. So obviously, the importers of cotton, they are going to prefer these rivals. Pakistan, it has got away with 19% tariffs. Then Vietnam, again, all these countries lie between 10 to 30% tariffs. Then Cambodia, all the importers of cotton, they will. India is now appearing as an expensive destination for imports. Similarly, if we talk about the seafood industry, I have told you how important India's exports are in terms of seafood. So other countries like Ecuador with 15% tariffs. Okay, then Thailand, Vietnam. So all these countries are also major exporters of seafood. Now they will be the preferred destinations of import. Okay, now next is whether Trump's tariffs policies are going to come back and haunt the US economy itself. And there have been signals, though a lot of the reports or videos you might be seeing of Walmart centers, of Tyson centers, that is meat packaging, of shutting down, but those are often conflicted or not true. But examples. Now, what happens is it is not just that Trump wants that all the manufacturing should come back to US. Now, for manufacturing, Trump would require plants, raw materials, components. Most importantly, why US started outsourcing its manufacturing in China, Vietnam, India was due to high labor costs in US itself. So, what exactly ultimately labor also he would have to, even if he establishes plants and manages to gain or manufacture or mine raw materials elements from uh, from the US itself within domestically, then also the labor it will add to the cost, and ultimately it's not the US companies that are going to bear the exact cost. It is not the retailers like Walmart. If they are getting bananas from Guatemala has been imposed with 10% tariffs. Okay. So first of all, there's hardly any place in US climatically that can support the plantation. Okay, plantation of banana. So manufacturing goes that there. Okay. Moreover, it is a very labor intensive procedure, plantations. So that also, it has to import. And even if Walmart is selling bananas, it has to bear the cost, but it will be a time when the cost will eat into its profit margins. So it will shift the extra burden of the prices or the import prices to the consumer. So the middle class, just we talk about India taxation and all. So the US middle class is going to get affected. Then one of the reports that currently a sweater, which is men's sweater that is imported from China, currently if it is $30, then it might in the future go up to $58. How much will be you? Even for example, Toyota has also warned of increased cost of to the tune of $9.5 billion. Okay, and we have already discussed. So what, even if, like for, we'll discuss one example of Apple also. So even if the plants, even if Ford decides to, even whatever we are manufacturing, phone, okay, technology like we have, the US has. If we talk about this Apple. So Apple, under the recent Apple manufacturing program, Apple has envisaged $100 billion to transfer all the manufacturing processes to US. So obviously it is not going to hurt India itself, which exports one out of three smartphones made to US, and it is a multi-billion dollar industry. But also The technology is US, but what about all the semiconductor components? What about all the other elements? And that is one of the reasons why US has to succumb. US has to play nice with China, because China is one of the significant, it has relative significant control over critical and rare earth materials. This the F block elements in the periodic table, they are very essential for aerospace, defense, manufacturing, electronics, vehicles, EV technologies. Okay. And moreover, I was talking about the EU's imports of LNG and fertilizers. US also has to play friends with Russia also. Why? Because it has been actively importing germanium, gallium, palladium, graphite for its defense manufacturing purposes. So you see the hypocrisy, and it is playing a double game. And in the start of the lecture, I have told you that he is given this failed marshal, this sycophant, this beggar, Asim Munir, a platform to instigate, provoke, say things which challenge or impugn the sovereignty of India. It is said that it will destroy. It has issued an nuclear threat. It says it will destroy half the world. What nonsense is he talking? And I don't know what lunacies these two are afflicted with, but nevertheless. And apparently, this trend is not new. It is a new now, as I said, that Trump has starting using economy as a hegemonic threat to concede demands from other countries. But initially, also that BRICS, a lot of countries are now involved in BRICS. The Asian Infrastructure and the BRICS Bank, the Asia Infrastructure and Industrial Development Bank. Because before this BRICS, all the organizations which were at the high table, the US was the main part. Like IMF is there, World Bank is there. So it is better, it is good. What India is doing, that India has to diversify its sources of dependence or cooperation to other organizations, to other countries. And it is US is doing. Now what is happening is US in acting in such a way that a lot of you might think that now China is relatively a good guy as compared to the US. And US's aim has always been to wean or peel India away from the influence of Russia and China. But what is US doing here? US has been imposing extra tariffs. It is trying to destabilize our economy. It is trying to incite India by its empty threats, and it is pushing India closer towards Russia and even a future some sort of partnership with China. So it is like Donald Trump wants to not only take the his economy down into the ground, but along all the other countries into the ground. But at the end, what India has shown, what India has shown by asserting its sovereignty, its independence, is that it will not easily kowtow or bow or succumb to these crazy demands of Trump or maybe others. And in fact, India is standing up to a bully like Trump. And it is important also. India aims to play at the high table. It aims to deal and collaborate, cooperate with the high countries, the powerful countries. But it is not that it will subvert its own sovereignty or interest. It is not that the bootlicking cabinet of Trump or other countries like Pakistan who will just beg Trump or be act as sycophants or flatters to get their demands considered. No, India is also setting an example in front of the other South countries, other South global South countries who look up to India, and then they know that India is going to stand up for its interest, and it is also going to help them to cater and negotiate their own interests. So, in this way, India, before engaging obviously backdoor negotiations and soft negotiations will keep on going, but India's energy security, most importantly its sovereignty, is in its own hands, not in US hands. So till we meet again next time, Jai Hind.